Oh,
Hi.
we're here to talk about progress in human consciousness in terms of innovation and in the agricultural era, people has been attempting to have increase the capacity of what we already have. For instance, if we build a crane, we'll be thinking about making it bigger, larger, being able of doing more amazing stuff instead of building something that's different from the crane that may be able to do work differently but potentially better. And simply by making that crane larger is considered innovation back then as the agricultural era.
Is that like an example of food revolution in America? Before the 19th century, like 16th, 17th century, British colonies in North America they just came to America and they faces severe hunger. They got to survive with help of Native Americans, so a lot of them die because they don't get like the help of a native. Afterwards, they realized that this is a place of extraordinary fertility. So compared to China or other countries on the earth, America has relatively less problem about hunger. People who live in America has much longer life expectation due to less severe hunger. At the beginning of the 19th century,
Oblige.
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 Oblige!
At the beginning of the 19th century, some colonial upper class from England still holds to the old European idea of noblesse oblige and made sure their workers had sufficient food. This keeps whole society away from hunger issue, but it also fostered the slave trade. Uh, because of the failure of revolution in Germany in 1848. So when it's 1855, a lot of Germans they decide to immigrate to America to get cheaper land, to get more fertilized.
Okay, so summing up, the entire process we just talked about is not like modern culture or to seek joy or enjoyment, however to solve problems, to meet our basic needs, in which is bound in our gene instead of our ideology or cultures. To describe this kind of drive, instead of saying it's primitive, I would say it's more natural. However, such naturalness is also the absence sense of difference, because the need of food is the same for every one of us. And back then, innovation is highly limited to such fields. Okay, to sum up, what we've just talked about are highly related to agriculture or the basic needs of humanity. As land, like, yeah, and that kind of resources, natural resources, are extremely, not to say primitive, but natural, with the absence of individuality or ideas or culture. And such simplicity are essentially the lower bound of our evolution. And back then, we don't really need art or such personal virtue
Fancy
to,
club, fancy stuff.
yeah, to actually make something special and make it to be called an innovation. Simply by making that crane larger and more powerful, it is innovation.
There's a little story that in 18
And
Abraham Lincoln
Lincoln.
become our no Abraham Lincoln become
That's
your
not how you spell
president.
Lincoln.
Oh wait, how do pronounce
Abraham Lincoln.
Abraham Lincoln? He
Yeah,
become your president.
ooh,
You
very
guys are
nice.
spies, I swear.
Let's see.
You guys are spies.
Evolution of consciousness.
In 1860s,
Abraham
Abraham
Lincoln.
Lincoln become American president. Her his principle is to stop
Stop slavery.
and there's a war called Civil War, which is really famous. The original purpose of that is North want to, the Northern try to stop splitting the country.
Okay.
Instead of end the slavery. Luckily, the Abraham Lincoln win this war, so he published the 解放奴隶宣言 Emancipation Proclamation. 再说一遍. In 1870, the number of hungry and homeless people in the United States increased due to industrialization because it transforms a human group from an agrarian society into an industrial society. Though economic developments were hugely beneficial overall, driving America's growth age, they had a negative impact on some of the poorest citizens. The early 20th century saw a substantial rise in agricultural productivity. America adds many foreigners, but the foreigners don't really understand the purpose of why
He's taking my stuff again. He's taking my pens. He took my keys, now he's taking my pens.
Your curse was in the video.
Huh? Oh, were you just taping?
So America adds many foreigners, but they don't really know why or how they add them.
Add foreigners. Okay, let's see.
So during the war, Americans would always, since America has most sufficient food, so he
Has
always,
plenty of food, essentially.
it always gives like some foreign countries food, but what's the reason? Nobody knows. In 1930s, the United States progress in reducing domestic hunger had been thrown into reverse by the Great Depression, which caused by the collapse of the stock market, which caused by a large-scale loss of confidence, led to a sudden reduction in consumption and investment spending. And the Great Depression started as an ordinary recession, but the decision of government shrinking of the money supply greatly exacerbated the economic situation. Also, the foreigners we mentioned earlier, they don't understand, so they don't really help Americans. It also helped cause a recession to descend into the Great Depression. In mid-1960s, hunger within the U.S. was widely considered to be a solved problem because in 1967, John Van Hengel
Yes, it doesn't matter.
invented food bank until the 1980s that U.S. food banks began to experience rapid growth. For our community service, we always go food bank.
So after the era of, after the problem with food supply is gone and people have sufficiently met the need of their basic survival, the idea of innovation or what to strive for has changed and upgraded. What that used to be satisfying, for instance, to make a larger version of what they already have might not be good enough. For instance, if I have already 1 can of beans, I would not be striving for 10 cans of beans because I want meat, for instance. That's just an example though. And speaking of innovation, it's more of, so at the post-industrial age. So back then, the fantasies at that time is, for instance, to have thousands of cans of being produced in an acre of ground, like field maybe, acre of field maybe. However, after that, the fantasies hasn't met, the fantasies are not met, and even though.
他老是跑了。
Please do. In history, there are 3 major progresses in the revolution of
Everything.
innovation, I would say. Previously, we need more quantity to satisfy our basic needs. For instance, survival, equality, or food. And once we have all that food, we are satisfied with the quantity. Instead of saying we need more beings, I'd say we want better being or like canned being.
More
I don't know.
fresh.
Yeah, more fresh. Relatively easily. The innovation has transferred into the need for some better beings, for instance, fancy food and things like that. After that, after like all the post-industrial age, which is the curve has been increasing so much that we're approaching a limit. And in order to continue that satisfaction I guess, instead of getting better, we need change, like fundamental changes.
Well, I think I can totally fit the food revolution history into your explanation. Well, we all know that there are so many so many food choices around us. For example, we can have lunch at Indian's restaurant, Chinese restaurant, steak restaurant, Chipotle, Piata, all the fast food restaurants, which are really close to our school, and there are plenty of them. This is most attractive, neat picture to me on Google Pictures.
So like say relative to older ways of producing
Spam.
food or like given like packaging food.
For sure, it has more proteins, like more healthy, tastes better for sure.
As you can see, there is more effort and so-called unnecessary stuff, the opposite of utilitarianism, going into this dish than this dish. Example leads us to the
That example really leads us into the change revolution. Here's a picture of tomatoes on Google Picture, which has so many clicks. For me, it's not only a dish tomato; it's more like an art. Like if you see it, you will feel satisfied. It looks colorful and well, all know molecular gastronomy. Basically, people get molecule from natural food into a weird shape or weird form, like a little circle. It really transformed the food into a totally different thing. Well, at least it looks different, but it tastes good. I think it's so cool.
Well, speaking of that, we can actually broaden the barrier of like this topic to humans. We have been transforming as well. From like the very early stages, what all we have been thinking about is like more food, better life, better health, or things like that. We aren't really changing ourselves. We're only changing our environment. That's almost like moving a can of ham into a nice dish. And now the more important part comes. That is, how can we change like the content of all these crazy meat into something that's more appealing? Of course, there is gonna be more effort and energy going into it. The opposite of utilitarianism, also fueled by the evolution of pretty much every single evolution. Say like industrial or agricultural evolution, we'll have to first survive and then do all the fancy stuff.
So does that mean to make a better thing that is not what we're seeking now, but to make a new thing is what
Yes.
we are, where we are.
The interesting thing is that just think about it, like for the first day of human society, say if we can only produce one can of food per day, and the second day we will be able to produce 2 cans of food, and this just continues, which is a good thing. However, there is a certain time that such increasement is not as satisfying as it was before. It's not as rewarding. It's just the way it is, and it does not really make our life any better. In order to continue such increase, instead of producing or the fundamental changes, we need to. Oh no, wait, shit, that's wrong. Okay. Instead of producing more or producing more effectively, fundamental changes are necessary.
We probably need something new.
And the 2 examples I'm going to talk about here is first CRISPR technology, which is a genetic modification technology, and deep learning, which is essentially simulation running on computer programs. No, that's not right. and deep learning, which is essentially a neural network created on computers, simulating human consciousness.
They're all high technology. I just came back from a very big of far field like this place. We all know that it's really convenient to go out, have lunch, and come back in an hour. And there were so many choices like Indian food, Chinese restaurant, bagel, Chipotle, piada, like Italian food. So many. This means that today we have efficient food, right? Even like this is not a big city, but we have so many restaurants. We have so many choices. People relatively lives in a, good society, right?
Satisfaction. What I found pretty interesting is that what all we rationalize is personal satisfaction throughout the entire time, throughout the history, even right now. The only drive or the main drive of innovation or change is simply what our right brain believes to be comforting or appropriate at that time.
Yeah, so maybe now if my parents ask me where do you want to go out to have lunch, probably I will not choose the restaurant with big quantity, but maybe better quality.
Yeah,
Do you agree with me?
Right, and also like speaking of culture or like what your choice is gonna be, is very much the result of what's rationalized or what our value is. So instead of saying some decision is just cultural, it's culturally correct, or this is just what I do because this is who I am, really isn't that accurate. And it might be better to say, these are my values, and these has built up my values, and all these decisions are meant to happen.
If I born in China, as a like real Chinese, maybe a Chinese restaurant would be my first choice. And if like some ABC, they will have like relatively more American choices.
Yeah, and like one of the simple truths that we can all observe is that us Chinese kids don't really go to Chinese restaurant that often. We just like pretty much go to whatever restaurant that's most easy for us. We do not choose based on what name it is, how we name that culture. We choose based on who we are, and it's always that way. We always behave by the way of what we believe instead of how we reason. And this can be related back to the TED Talk we have watched in the class, Golden Circle. The psychologist talked about how humans tend to behave more naturally, starting thinking from why and then to how and then to what instead of the other way around. And focusing on what we believe instead of how we reason and justify our decisions is more effective, and it's almost like a way of predicting and controlling.
Yeah, for today's my lunch, I choose salmon, tomato bagel. It's kind of healthy for me because that's what I seek now. I'm seeking now, and it reminds me the history of eating revolution. Maybe hundreds years ago, we don't kind of like seek this. People just want to fill their stomach because they need to survive. And maybe 50 years ago, people just want like.
Yeah, what all they have is what they are gonna get, and what they want or what they are pursuing is simply what the next step of what they can possibly get. And like canned food.
Oh,
like,
yeah,
it's all packaged the way it is.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so like just to sum up, I think what we're trying to portray here, although it might be segmented, is that the change or like the evolution of innovation has been going like crazy recent years. It's almost like flat for thousands of years, and immediately it goes right up, skyrockets. However, our ethics are not changing the way it's supposed to. It's still like leveling up and lagging behind of what newer ideas or newer choices are near reality, I guess. And our cultures are almost like a burden. I hate to say this, but I hear diversity is a word so much, and I hear so little of inclusivity. It's almost like here is who I am, this is my culture. I am changing. Why? Because you have to respect for what I already am, and the outside going immediate like fast changing reality, or the innovations or CRISPR technology, deep learning, and things like that, are straight up discomforting, or sometimes even aggressive to some ideologies.
This reminds me like our phone. Maybe like
Yeah,
10
like
years
10
ago.
years ago, it's not imaginable, and critics must have thought about some negative effects of it. However, our ethics are just lagging behind, but it's kind of keeping up. Currently, like just
all
think
the
yeah.
iPhone phones like look exactly the same.
Yeah,
Well,
what
the
I
only
found
thing is
pretty
it
amazing.
become better, like has better battery, better like.
It just think about like computer has been there for this many years, and it has been progressing, and it's getting faster. However, what we are facing right now, what we're experiencing right now, is not just computer being developed over like 100 years or so. It's like every 1 year there is new, just like a new form of computer being created, and if our ethics is lagging behind the way it used to, it might not work out. And one of the most viewed TED Talk of 2018, we talked about an ethical revolution, and that might be the evolution that goes after farming or industrial revolution, consciousness type of change and things like that. We might need like overall reform or like understand the way of understanding culture and ethics.
To be honest, I feel like this step, like we are now, is kind of boring because I don't want to say it's unnecessary, but it is, since we live in a relatively good life, right?
Yeah, and speaking of boredom, it's actually a very important topic. Back then, what's boredom? Boredom pretty much equates to laziness. However, we all know that artificial intelligence and things like that are taking like stripping away our jobs. Isn't that a good thing? Like, isn't an easy life something good? But laziness cannot be glorified, can it? It almost feels like ethics is fighting against innovation. I'm not saying innovation is always good, and just progressing like uncontrolled is a good thing to try, like literally cloning humans or trying to do that kind of consciousness created studies is something good. However, I do believe that, selfishly speaking, the only thing that you're going to be able to experience is your lifetime. And there is a very little chance of, you should feel really fortunate about being alive. There are so many particles around us that are dead. And if we just spend our lifetime following whatever that's already there instead of experiencing and trying to create new ideologies, it might be a waste of it.
This afternoon, I asked Mr. Squires, do you want some free pizza? He is so excited, and he even wants to give me some money to get a pizza. Well, as a result, we didn't find any pizza place, but a bagel place. So I bring him half delicious salmon, tomato, cream cheese bagel. Well, apparently he didn't eat it. If that means what we are seeking is not only for our stomach, but also for our brain.
Highly agreed. After all, all we were doing is selfish. Sorry for that. Here we go.